Hola, and welcome back to the show. Diane. Cece joins us. Boy, is East Norwalk lucky to have Diane. Diane is the leader of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. If you subscribe to her newsletter, you will not believe how much information it contains, how many calls to action there are. This woman really cares, really cares about her neighborhood. Diane, Cece, welcome back to the show. Hi.
Good morning, Lisa. Thanks so much for that generous introduction there.
Yeah,
the newsletters are packed, and, sometimes I get feedback like, these things are lengthy and there's a lot to read, and we have to click on stuff and, kind of educate ourselves. And unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of the beast right now. There's a lot going on that's impacting East Norwalk, and what I try to do is get as much information out there as possible and let people kind of decide for themselves which aspects they're most either concerned with or interested in, and then, kind of lead them in a direction to where they can get more information or how to ask questions, how to provide feedback, et cetera. So, those newsletters tend to be lengthy, and you're right, it's a labor of love to try to interpret city information and state information and then get that out to folks in a way that's, not dumbing anything down, but also trying to not get it over too many people's heads. When it comes to land use and zoning, between all the acronyms and legal stuff, and it's very confusing, and it's hard to understand if you're not involved.
The problem is it's something where people's eyes glaze over, but it couldn't really be more important. That's the thing.
Exactly. And so, a lot of times what we try to do when we have time and when we're under siege, I think you get the newsletter, right? So
I do. I
think
it.
The last headline was East Norwalk is under siege.
Yeah,
and that's not really being over dramatic, because
so tell me why.
We'll talk in a minute about the state impact and the local impact.
Well, let's hear about the local. Let me hear about specifically what's going on in East Norwalk right now. You want us to know.
So with the local stuff, and it relates to the state, because what's ending up happening here now is that gradually, but now more rapidly, the city is looking to advance land use changes that really would support the state, what the state's looking to mandate in the votes that are coming up, in terms of maximizing density, in particular around transit zones, neighborhoods that have train stations, bus routes, access to the highway with commuter parking, et cetera. And East Norwalk actually is kind of the epicenter of that because we have all three. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is that over the past few years, our local planning and zoning department and commission have been gradually increasing the amount of density by changing the zoning in East Norwalk. You may recall a year and a half ago they approved what's called the East Avenue Village Transit Zone. Yeah. And that was part of the East Norwalk Transit-Oriented Development District. And what that EVTZ zone did is to designate the corridor of East Avenue from I-95 south all the way to, or south of I-95 all the way down to Cemetery Street. And in doing so, that zoning automatically changed to be able to allow 3.5-story buildings and maximum density, meaning one unit, actually double the population density within a building, or residential density within a building. That's already been done, Lisa. It's the entire corridor. In addition to the corridor itself on East Avenue, the city also included going into some side streets as well, Rowan Street, Van Zandt Street, etc. So it's a little bit more than just the corridor itself. That, we fought vehemently, and we couldn't get it denied, so that's here. And that's how the One Cemetery Street 77-unit development was approved.
I see.
Now what the city is looking to do as part of a complete zoning overhaul is looking to take major portions of East Norwalk within this particular area and change those to go from one-family zoning automatically over to allow two-family zoning.
You're kidding me. Really?
So major portions of it. And the map is online. Lisa, please remind me before we hang up to tell people how they can get to all this information.
No, do it now.
Everything I'm talking about.
Do it now.
So it's norwalkct.gov or .org. Either one still works. And when they go there, there's an icon on the menu screen that'll say Norwalk Zoning Reg, or they can just go through the government links and they'll be looking for planning and zoning, and then zoning regulation update. So everything that I'm talking about today and much more is there. All the information is there so people can go and read it. And a lot of it is readable. They've done it in a format where there's some individual fact sheets on all the components of this. So people can really kind of bring themselves up to speed.
We're chatting with Diane, Cece. So what? Wait. So, but under what thinking? In other words, was there a referendum taken by people in East Norwalk? Do the people who live in the neighborhood have any say at all over this?
Well, there'll be public hearings in just a few weeks. There's nothing really that we have control over because the Planning and Zoning Commission and not the Common Council will ultimately vote on this.
Is anybody from the Planning and Zoning Commission? Is anyone in the Planning and Zoning Commission somebody who lives in East Norwalk?
We do have one person who lives in East Norwalk proper. Luckily for us, she is a commissioner that does do her homework and ask questions and provide feedback. So we're grateful for that. But planning and zoning commissioners are supposed to take into account the whole city as they're making these decisions. And I'll quickly remind your viewers, because this is also confusing, Norwalk is one of the cities that has appointed zoning and planning commissioners.
Oh, that's right.
We don't have elected ones. So they're appointed by the mayor and then approved by our Common Council. So we already have this whole zone that's already slated for maximum density. The estimates of a full build-out under that zoning that's already in is a potential for 1,200 apartment units. Once this other change goes in, I haven't even been able to calculate what this could mean. So it doesn't mean that every single family zone is automatically going to convert to two-family. But the way that he's written these regulations that the consultants have is that they automatically will become eligible to be able to build two-family. But the scary thing is that it would be as of right instead of by special permit.
Wow, that's
so
a big
your
difference.
neighbors wouldn't even know. There'd be no public hearing. There would be no consideration of the what we call the 13 special permit considerations that the commission must consider. So it's as of right. It also is changing some of the way that they're looking at heights. In some portions of the, in this area and other portions of the city, there's likely to be a further reduction in parking minimum requirements. Although Mr. Kleppen has said, though, that two-family parcels would require 4 on-site parking spaces. And, Lisa, I hate always sounding so cynical, but honestly, I think you know by now that those are the first things that get waived. And so there's a cry of hardship that says, we can't provide that parking. And so those things get waived, and you're going to have high-density multifamily housing that's going to continue to impact the lack of parking here, the traffic congestion, the impact on city services, police, fire, schools, etc., and just the infrastructure itself. And can I mention one other thing, Lisa, in terms of process, because I'm a big process wonk on this.
Sure.
The city has been working on this particular plan with the consultants for just over 3 years, with very little interaction with the community as they were going through this, and virtually no specifics given to the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of periodic reviews, like to be able to show where they were going, start showing some of the maps, what they were recommending. So very little information out there until just a few weeks ago in April. So essentially, the city has been working on this for nearly 3.5 years, and the community is going to have between 2 and 8 weeks to completely digest it, understand it. Nope, the first meeting was April 12th.
I can't
the first public presentation that included the zoning map. I have to add this, too. There was an initial presentation that just went over the project itself and talked about the regulation changes. They refused to present the map at that meeting because they knew that it was going to be so controversial that they were afraid people were going to focus on the map and lose the whole background of what they're calling the justification for this. So they withheld the map from the public until April 12th. Now, if he's going to hold public hearings in June, then we're talking about 8 weeks away, but there are still some neighborhoods that haven't had their individual presentations on these to see what their impact is and to ask questions. Some of those aren't until the end of May, which means those neighborhoods, for all intent and purposes, are only going to have a couple of weeks to digest hundreds of pages of data. I'm looking at all different zoning consolidations within the recommended regulations. And just on that basis alone, this isn't fair. But quickly, it's obvious that they're trying to shove this through. I don't want to get into the politics of things, but I will tell people it's an election year here. And this thing needs to be slowed down. If they're working on it for 3.5 years, it's not fair to give the public, 8 weeks to try to figure out what's going to happen in their neighborhood.
Who controls the agenda here?
Who personally, or
is it the Planning and Zoning Commission? Is it the people that are employed by the city of Norwalk? Who's controlling the pace?
It's a combination of both. It's through the Planning and Zoning Director, who reports into the Economic Development Director, who coincidentally also controls transportation, mobility, and parking, among other departments. But the ultimate vote is the Planning and Zoning Commissioners. There are 2 co-chairs and then commissioners that are represented throughout the city. It doesn't go to the council. There's no other consideration of it. And then
does anybody have standing to appeal this kind of a policy-wide change?
Well, I'm happy that you asked that question, because one of the things that neighborhood associations are doing, and we're starting to work together now, just like we used to in the past under the coalition, to take a look at what legal recourse we may have with this. And so the question would be, even if associations don't have legal standing, certainly the property owners who are impacted do. Okay. And so there is an opportunity, but I've already kind of floated the idea of at least considering some sort of, if that's the case, then to consider some sort of a class action suit to either stop this thing in its track or to just get the timing to go back to the table.
It would be an interesting novel approach. I've never heard of a class action suit on behalf of neighbors affected by what they would perceive to be adverse zoning. I wonder how that would float. I don't know if there's any precedent for that.
Me too, and I wonder if we might be the test case for it too. And I haven't had time to do any research on this. That's the other thing, is that this is really a full-time job.
I know. The way you do it, it is.
It really is. It's insane. And even when the city is responsive and they're answering questions, it's still an enormous amount to try to digest and then figure out, how we can get back to the table. The 2 interesting things that happened with this, though, is early on in the process, I said, it's okay then to, now you're going to try to engage the public at the last minute, and you're seeking feedback. But why are you really seeking feedback if there's no opportunity to change this? So I asked Mr. Kleppen, our director, what is the mechanism by which something could possibly be changed if neighbors really vehemently are opposed to something and they have legitimate reason to do so? And by now you may have seen the famous video of his response of saying that at this point he pretty much considers these recommendations as what they're going to be, and that even if 2,000 residents came out opposed to something, that if he felt it was in the best interest for the city, he would fight till he was blue in the face to keep that in.
And this is who's saying this?
The Planning and Zoning Director, Steve Kleppen.
And he does not, he works for the city. Does he live in Norwalk?
Right. No, he doesn't. He doesn't live in Norwalk.
Is he elected by the people of Norwalk?
No, he's appointed.
I see. But he makes money. This is his full-time job.
Yes, he's an employee of the city. And he's the primary staff advisor to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So when zoning directors issue their staff memo to commissions, for all intent and purposes, that's their advice on what they're advising them to do.
Where is Mayor Harry Rilling on this, Diane Cece? Where is Mayor Rilling on this?
Well, Harry Rilling, so just so people know the chain, too, because a lot of times politicians will say it's hands off of zoning, but Steve ultimately reports to Harry Rilling. So the mayor has control, but more so than that, the mayor appoints every one of those commissioners. And so those are hand-picked commissioners. Everyone who sits on it now, because Harry's been in office for so long, is obviously a Harry appointee. So it's going to be, I think at some point the council people and the mayor will have to speak out on this, because it's not a private development application where there's possibly some statutory restrictions on them getting involved in a land use application. This is an application from the city itself, from his own staff, recommending changes throughout the city. So they would be hard-pressed to try to tell the community, well, we can't comment on it, or we're not going to be involved in it. And as far as I'm concerned, the buck stops there, and he will have to he will have to answer to the public on this one way or the other.
Okay. Diane, Cece, thank you so much. If people want to subscribe to your newsletter, how would they do that?
Thanks for that. Two things on that. So the newsletter, the best thing to do is go to our website, which is eastnorwalk.org, or you can email us at info@eastnorwalk.org. And our monthly meetings are open to the public. The next one is this coming Monday, and our guest is actually Planning and Zoning Director Steve Kleppen. Okay. And he will be joining us on Monday to discuss the specifics to the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association zoning changes.
And that will be an in-person or a Zoom?
That's via Zoom. We're still 100% Zoom right now until we get some technology and funding to go hybrid. And it's via Zoom, and it's at 7 p.m. And when people sign up for the newsletter, we provide the link on the weekend for them to hop on and join us on the meeting. We encourage anyone who lives in East Norwalk, obviously, to do that. But others can join in as well.
Diane, Cece, thank you so much for coming on.
Lisa,
thanks for giving us a real education.
Thank you so much. And I hope as I delve more into this and this becomes more developed with more facts that I can come back on again and keep people informed, especially you, what's going on. Okay.
Thank you, Diane. Diane, Cece of the East Neighborhood Norwalk Association, ENNA, ENNA. I'm Lisa Wexler. We'll be right back.